the words we're speaking to our kids, they're going to become the soundtrack, the inner voice in those kids' heads as they grow. I mean, they're gonna hear our voices for the rest of their lives, whether the words we're speaking are loving and kind or not. And especially when kids are little, it's like there's wet cement in their mind and heart. And the words we're speaking, they're forming impressions there. Over time, those impressions harden, and they form their worldview in large part based on the way that we're speaking life and encouragement or criticism to them.
Thanks for joining me for a Dad Awesome conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been, a long time that I've been listening to your podcast or watching the YouTube channel and just learning about marriage, about parenting, and grateful that now we can kind of team up and have a conversation together. So tell me this though, to start in, you've got 4 boys, I have 4 girls. You're a chapter ahead of me. My oldest is 11. Isn't your youngest around 9, 10? How old is your youngest?
Yeah, our youngest just turned 10. Our oldest is about to turn 20. So
20.
It's
different
wild.
chapter. And we're praying for dad. I pray with a bias towards dads of boys. I pray more for dads with boys because I have a vested interest in praying for those dads.
Right. Lord, let there be some good men for these girls to marry.
That's it. At least 4. It got at least 4 good men. No, I'm curious though. What are you learning in this chapter? Like where do you find yourself, the aha or the discoveries in the dad life? Any recent learnings?
Man, that's a great question. I will say that the learning keeps coming. You never get to a place where you're like, all right, I got this figured out. And as soon as you think you got it figured out with one kid, the season changes and they're into something different and you have to reshuffle the deck. And then what works with one kid doesn't always work with another because everyone's so unique. But I would say, man, part of what I'm learning is to just try to slow down and be present more. I think in the early years of fatherhood, especially, it was just the pace. The pace is still intense.
Yeah.
I don't have the energy that I had 20 years ago when the journey began, so I kind of had to slow down. But I think just being present in these moments, in like every single day, looking for the undistracted one-on-one conversation with each kid, trying to connect with them in their world each day. It doesn't have to be big or fancy or structured, but being intentional about that. Those tend to be, my best moments of the day. Whereas I think in the early years, I missed a lot of that because I was running too hard, or I thought family time had to look a certain way. And I don't know, maybe it's life or age or whatever, but I'm more laid back now. And I think that's helping me catch more moments that I missed early on.
Yeah. Yeah. Your youngest son at this 10-year-old moment, I'm just wondering, is there any areas you're like, this is for sure different than what our oldest son, when he was, 10 years ago, when he was 10, any like calibrations you're like, yep, this is different in how I roll out the dad life?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like, I got angry faster, when they were younger.
Sure.
And I hate that, I hate that for my older, I don't think they're scarred or anything, I wasn't beating on them, but I had a shorter fuse, and I hate that they saw that because, when our kids, what they see in us, they think is healthy and they think is normal, even if it's totally broken. And so with our younger one, I find myself like, I'm way more patient with him.
Yeah.
And, now in some ways, the older boy's got a better version of me because I was more energetic. The younger one gets a better version because I'm more patient. So maybe it's a flip flop, but that is one thing. He's getting like a more patient version of me. Even just in the 10 years between oldest and youngest, though, I've like the invasion of just kind of screens everywhere has been harder to navigate than it was for the first one, second one, even.
Sure.
Because now, like, that's just their world. They're immersed all the time, and you have to be so intentional to find things to get them off screen. So with my first kids, it was like they were wanting me to go outside, dragging me outside to go do something. With my younger 2 kids, I'm having to beg and drag them to get outside and get off the screen, and that changed fast. So that's one thing that's changed.
And I've learned to not ask the screen question, the phone, the video game, that question as a capsule of this is the forever truth. Instead, I've asked like, hey, what's the current chapter? Like, how do boundaries
Exactly.
for your specifically your youngest two? Like, what is current chapter of boundaries, expectations, limits? Like, what does that look like right now for you guys?
It is it is always evolving. Um, one good rule that we've kind of stuck to
Mhm.
is that we don't let them have screens in their bedroom. So when whether it's a TV or anything, it's like so when they go to bed, having that bedtime, they don't have to go right to sleep, but it's sometimes the only time of their day, even school included, where there are no screens and like they have to read a book or they have to use their imagination or they have to do something. And I'm really thankful that we stuck to that. Um, Outside of that, the video games, how much you can play, how much you can't play. Like for our youngest one, it's still he just gets to play on the weekends and then he can like earn like weekday time.
Sure.
Um and so he's always lobbying for that.
Wait,
He's like, "Hey,
how
I
does he
got
earn it?
this."
I'm so curious. What are some of the ways he can earn weekend time or weekday time?
Yeah, so he gets he can get weekday time like, when he gets his report
Sure.
card,
Yep.
his grades are good, he get a bonus day for that. If he, if usually we let him know ahead of time like, hey, if you'll do this, if you'll help with this project or you'll do
Sure.
this thing, the reward will be you can get like a weeknight bonus and he loves that stuff. So having such a strong incentive is good to be able to, leverage teaching moments. But if the boys had it their way, they would be on a screen 24/7. And it's tough because on one hand, they need to be able to navigate the digital world that they're going to live in. But on the other hand, as parents, we're all living in uncharted waters trying to figure out how to equip them to be able to handle the technology, especially when they're out there on their own and they're having to manage these boundaries by themselves while still letting them have a childhood that's not sabotaged just by screens.
Right, right. I kind of take an unconventional approach to preparing for these conversations, and I was just random like word searching around your name and parenting or this or that, and I discovered a poem that you wrote like 9 years ago. And when I tell you that I love you, this poem. Do you remember writing this poem? Do I have
Yeah,
this
yeah,
right?
I do.
It's not a different Dave Willis. So I'm not going to read the poem. I'm going to include it in the show notes. But to me, this is just such a theme for my four little girls. And we talk about how much dad loves them. We talk about, how many miles and how many times around the earth or to the moon and back. And like we use, but it was such a fun read to think about you expressing love to your boys. And now that'll just be a hook for the guys to go in the show notes and read it.
Yeah,
It takes a
thank you.
minute.
Thanks for finding that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good find. Um, yeah, I hadn't thought about it. I need to dig that up and like share that with the younger boys because I don't yeah, I wrote that in a different season when the younger boys like were too young to even comprehend it. So yeah,
It'll
I
make
need
them
to
smile.
share that
It'll
with
make
them.
the younger
Yeah.
one smile. I guarantee my 11-year-old is gonna smile and laugh when she reads it. And it was written before AI, so we know it was your creativity versus. But that theme of love and expressing love with our words as dads, would you just kind of, yeah, where does that take you right now when you think about expressing words with or expressing love through words, written or verbal?
Well, I feel like we cannot overestimate the power of our words. And God designed it that way, that he created the whole universe using his words. He could have created it any way he wanted. Then he created us in his image, giving us power in our words. And especially for fathers to their children, the power of being able to bless your child with your words, encouraging them is or the negative impact of being really critical. Either way, the words we're speaking to our kids are they're gonna become the soundtrack, the inner voice in those kids' heads as they grow. I mean, they're gonna hear our voices for the rest of their lives, whether the words we're speaking are loving and kind or not. And especially when kids are little, it's like there's wet cement in their mind and heart. And the words we're speaking, they're forming impressions there. Over time, those impressions harden and they form their worldview in large part based on the way that we're speaking life and encouragement or criticism to them. And a lot of us are, carrying around scars of words, negative words that were spoken over us. And we need to do the work of finding healing and letting the Lord bring healing to that. But I don't know. I mean, words have power. That's really been a theme Ashley and I have have been leaning into in our parenting, even in our speaking when we're going out. Like instead of just talking about sex and all those kind of things, which we still do, I really feel like the words thing right now is something the Lord's just saying like, hey, this needs attention. This is something that people are underestimating, and as parents, we've got to get this right.
Yeah. I want to explore how words, even relating to, I mean, a couple decades of you and your wife, Ashley, building into marriage and strengthening and going to topics that maybe some other radio shows, podcast conferences aren't going there, and even themes that you guys have titled books and events and podcast series around naked marriage and around like just like let's go there, right? Like you kind
Yeah.
of you know when you're getting into it that you're going to go hit these topics. If I go to words and words with your boys, words can also unlock categories of conversation that become safe and builds a foundation for the future of these boys being young men and married men who have less baggage to bring to the marriage. So there's a whole thread there that I'm excited to explore with you. What are some ways we can use, dads can use their words and intentionality to form a foundation of God's when God sees sex, when God sees this phase you're going through right now as a young man, when God sees what you did because you stumbled into looking at this thing that like could bring hiddenness, but no, this is like using words like that. Could you really, I'm asking, take us into how you feel about the sex talk with your boys, but I want to focus even broader than a talk into like safety with our words that we bring to our boys.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think well, it's not the sex talk really. I think it's the conversations, the talks plural that we're having
Yes.
all the way through, I mean all the way through. And it starts young where you're talking about just how God made you a boy or God made you a girl and how that's a beautiful thing. And like
Yes.
we're living in a culture where something as simple as that has been confused and hijacked and sabotaged. So to just celebrate the fact that God made you beautifully and wonderfully made. He made no mistakes when he made you. Your gender is a gift. It is a gift given by God. It's a gift with no return or exchange policy,
Mhm.
and it's part of his design and a very important part of his design for your life. And it means that one day you'll get to be a father, one day you get to be a mother, and what that means. But to celebrate it and to let him know like your body's not dirty or shameful. Yeah, there are certain parts that are private, and we need to be really careful with that and make sure that nobody's touching us inappropriately and talking openly about if anybody ever does come to us um, but removing shame from stuff. Because I think whenever we try to like scare kids with we think we're protecting them, but it's like, oh, we know we don't, we never talk about that. We cover this, and what they're hearing in their minds are like these parts are dirty, or something is wrong with me. I'm dirty, and so even from an early age, celebrating the fact that God made your body. Your body's a beautiful thing. Um, your gender is a beautiful thing. As they get older, as they start getting older, talking and about the changes that are coming and celebrating it. Again, not looking at it with fear or
Mhm.
anything or even awkwardness, just saying, hey, you're going to be becoming a man or a woman. And that is so amazing. And here are some things that are going to happen. Like, you're going to, these are some of the changes you can expect. And, and ours talks have only been with boys. So we haven't had to
Yep.
get into like menstruation and, all of that, which is a whole different realm. I'll let Jeff handle those conversations for you guys. But
Yes.
so
Yes.
I'm more like, we're talking about
Mhm.
um you get to wear deodorant now because you need it. You stink, and that means you're becoming a man. You're gonna start getting some pubes, and that's awesome. And
Yes.
I don't need to see them, but if you want to like give me a fist bump and let me know when any arrive, I'll celebrate with you. But just celebrating those things. And then of course, with time, talking about counterfeits out there,
Hmm.
being honest about pornography, which was, a struggle I fell into in my teenage years. That we've talked a lot about that, and that's just everywhere in the world. These kids are growing up in, whether they're looking for it or not. They're being bombarded with these counterfeit messages about sex and body image. And so just trying to be a safe place to be honest about, hey, you're going to hear things that aren't true, that aren't real, that aren't right, that are broken messages, but God has a plan for sex and it's beautiful and awesome, but it's for marriage. And just trying to establish that foundation so that our kids aren't afraid to talk to us about the big questions when they start hearing stuff, and they will hear stuff.
The counterfeits. So your youngest, your 10-year-old. I think that is the average age that kids are exposed to pornography. Was it a few years ago that you talked to that son about counterfeits, or what? Roughly when were you letting know some of the shadow side of God's beauty and how He's made our bodies like this is harmful, and you can come talk to me if you see something. Like, when was that conversation?
Yeah. So for our youngest, who was 10, I think it was 2 years ago, when he was like 8, and we'd had kind of some general conversations about it, but I didn't really think like this was kind of an issue yet. But we'd gone on a vacation somewhere, and wherever we were, there was like an abnormally large amount of young ladies wearing abnormally small bathing suits, which, so like, it was just out in his face. And as an 8-year-old, even, he was clocking it like, okay, this is new, this is different. I wonder, I wonder, what is happening underneath the bathing suit, because this is something I haven't seen. So we have Covenant Eyes, we have filtering softwares on our device, and out of curiosity, he did a search as an 8-year-old on an iPad at the house for I think it was for naked lady or something, and it blocked the search, and it sent us
Yeah.
an alert, and so we realized that it was him, and we talked to him, and he was so like, there was like shame and embarrassment,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he felt dirty, felt guilty. He was just, he was, which is how the devil wants us to feel. And I was like, no, buddy, listen, like, God put that curiosity in you,
Mhm.
and he made our bodies to be beautiful, and he made you to notice that and to notice the beauty of it. But when we look at a woman and just look at her like in an object, then that's hurtful to her. That's hurtful to ourselves. That hurts God, because that's God's daughter. And one day in marriage, we start in like age appropriate ways, talk about it, why it's inappropriate to search that, why it's natural to be curious about
Mhm.
that, how we have to kind of guard our eyes, and but to do it in a way that hopefully takes the shame away. And then also there were, some consequences, like, well, I think you knew that we've talked enough to know where you knew that was an inappropriate thing to look for, even though you didn't see it, you were looking for it. And so we're going to have to, take this iPad away for a
Some
while. Now that,
freedom. Yeah.
yeah, in a way that it doesn't add shame, but it lets you know that, like, all right, you have to maintain trust.
Earn
And
trust. Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
So that was the way that it was for him, like in our older boys before kind of the digital age. I remember our second son, who's about 18 now. I was in a barber shop with him, and he was probably about 8,
Mhm.
and he was staring in this magazine with huge eyes, and it was like just a regular magazine. And I was like, "What are you looking at, buddy?" And it was like a lady in a bikini in this ad, and I had to have the same conversation with him
Yep.
right there in the barber shop. But then, he's a little bit more rebellious. Like 5 minutes later, he's holding up a different magazine, like a fishing magazine, and his eyes are huge again. And I grabbed it, and he, at 8 years old, had put the original magazine inside the fishing
He's
magazine.
covered.
It was he was going for it. He's like, Dad, I'm sorry. I just really like looking at that bikini girl. I'm like, okay. So we had to kind of like double down on the talk. But
Mhm.
anyway, it's no dull moments in raising kids.
Yeah, but that a moment with love and safety, and we're not going to go to shame. We're going to go to intentional explanation, a firm curiosity. I mean, this is, to me, this is not what I experienced as a young man of the safety of this is how I feel. Like him even saying in the barbershop of like, I like looking like that's so like that relationship is such a gift and the moment's a gift of just knowing, oh, my son is desiring and has been like, so I just love there's a celebration to really this is what I found through all of your radio shows, podcasts, books, content you've created around marriage and sex is just like, let's go celebration and healing and wholeness. And
Yes.
yeah, so I love that that's the direction you went with answering that question. And there's one other question is around, I know you chatted with at least your older boys about your journey of stumbling, of getting the grip of pornography. Roughly what age was that you actually shared that this was a struggle for you?
Yeah. So I've been really honest, and it's like always honest, but like
Yeah,
as they get older, you
yeah,
can get more
more.
detailed, I
Hmm.
guess. So with our two older ones by this point, like, I've kind of told them everything, even as they've gotten into relationships. Our second son, who's about 18, he's gotten into a dating relationship. And so we've talked about boundaries there, and he's asked questions. And I try to just be like really honest with him, even with the uncomfortable stuff. And he was like, "Well, what about you and mom? Like, did you and mom have sex with each other? Did you and mom do this?" And I've had, to say like, "Listen, we did not. Your mom, she's always done things the right way in that department. And when we got together, we we both committed to doing it right. Before your mom, like, I started out with really good boundaries in my dating relationships. I'd fallen into pornography. That really not only kept me in that pattern of sin, but it eroded boundaries in relationships. And little by little, I started making making bad choices in these dating relationships, and like, where I never got to the point of having intercourse. Like, there was sexual sin in those
Mm,
relationships that I
yeah,
deeply regret. And I want to protect you from falling into that,
yeah.
because it's just, you got to decide in advance. You can't decide in a moment of temptation what you're going to do. You have to decide in advance kind of where those boundaries
Mm,
are. And I said, and if you're looking at the wrong things, you're thinking on the wrong things, it's going to totally blur and erode those boundaries and move those boundary lines in the wrong direction. And and to be able to talk about it in terms of my own experience, which I know a lot of dads are terrified of having those conversations, because we want our kids to see us as perfect. But our teaching authority, moral authority, doesn't come from a place of perfection, and our kids don't need it to come from a place of perfection, but they desperately need it to come from a place of honesty and authenticity, to say like, listen, this is where I blew it. This is where God, brought healing. And even though he brings forgiveness, like, there's still baggage, and there's still pain that those decisions cause. And I want to protect you and prevent you from that. And so I've had those conversations with them. Um, I mean, I don't know if it's like a magic age as much as
right.
knowing each child,
Yeah.
kind of where that child is, and, and, um, and kind of going
Yeah.
from there. So
Dave, I'm hearing you explain, and I'm confession of sin to God, to friends, trusted friends, to spouse, but it's not confession of sin to your boys, but it's humility and vulnerability that feels
yeah,
to me, I'm just like cheering as a dad of girls, thinking about dads going there with their boys and explaining like this connects to this. For me, this is my journey and how I wish like I could have gone this path and you can go this path. Like, so like, thank you for explaining the answer, even though it's not, yeah, it's not a formula, but it's a posture that I pray that all of us dads would lean into with more courage. So, can you think of any resources to help? Passport to Purity is one that's come up a number of times as a
yeah,
curriculum.
yeah.
Is any other top of mind curriculums, books, helpful resources around these conversations?
Yeah, but, Passport to Purity, which is a family life resource, is was helpful to us. We're actually talking to Family Life now about helping them kind of do an updated version.
Yes. You
that
and
I think
Ashley would create? Are you guys
Ashley
gonna?
and I would do with family life. So stay tuned. I mean, I
Yes.
think that's going to happen.
Okay.
It's not like totally for sure, but I feel like that's most likely going to happen where it would be like a video training resources on how to teach kids about sex, which I would so want to do. For boys in particular, I actually have a book out called Raising Boys Who Respect Girls,
Yeah.
which is really all on this topic. It's like it's what the Bible has to say about sex. It's about fatherhood. It's about teaching young men specifically in age appropriate ways how to walk in that manhood and walk in purity. And I feel like that's a helpful resource that and not just from my experience, but a whole lot of people's experiences went into creating that resource. Um, and there's more out there, but it's one of those areas where there's a lot of room for more resources. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, I wish my church had something or this, maybe God's tapping you on the shoulder to use
Yes.
your testimony or
Mm.
use your abilities to say, like, I want to help create something around this because all of us need each other's voices in this. And it's one of the scariest parts of parenthood, but we don't have to figure it out on our own. We can help each other.
I'm so glad you brought up that side of because that's my primary way of growing is by learning, gathering resources, asking questions. Like this ministry, Dad Awesome, has been a gift to me as the champion of it. Like right, I grow through. So I pray often that more dads would be the spark in some way. We just need more of us that are saying, I want to make a difference and I want to share. So thank you for that. Also, your book, Raising Boys Who Respect Girls, that was like my next thing to bring up. So thank you for bringing it up. And like 7-ish years ago, now I have not yet had a chance to read, partially because I still read with a little bit of a bias towards I want to learn for raising girls.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
But
it's
I think it'd be
yeah.
helpful for dads
You
of
need to
girls
write
or
the you
boys.
need to write the girl version, raising godly raising girl. I mean, there's
Yes,
because I wasn't going to touch that. I'm like, I don't have any experience here.
sure.
I'm not going to do it. So I was waiting for Jeff to come along and write the girl version.
Yes. Well, is there anything though in the last 6, 7 years since you wrote that book that you're like, oh, this is another discovery in the topic of raising boys who respect girls? I know we've hit some of the topics, but there's a whole another set of themes
Oh
underneath
man,
that
well,
theme.
gosh, I'll tell you, like right now, the stuff that scares me the most for our culture is kind of the way that technology, the kind of the next iteration of pornography is, not to turn this into like a science fiction thing, but this is where things are headed. Like the AI is coming so far and robotic technology is coming so far that in the near future, the prevalence of AI, very human-like sex robots are going to be
Mhm.
all over the place, and it creates this whole like moral and ethical dilemma, especially for people that aren't Christians that are trying to navigate this without God's design for sex, where they're like, well, yeah, why would I not learn with this tool that's basically just helping? It's basically just I'm still just masturbating. This isn't even sex. I'm just using it with technology. But when we look at a human form, something that's created to look exactly like a young woman, and to react and act and look and talk like a young woman, there is no way we can have those kind of interactions and it not objectify actual women. We're learning about sex from, and I think, porn is probably going to start going more in that direction as the technology comes along, where it's not just with people, but it's with these robots, and that desensitizes. Even if you're only
Yes.
watching it, it's desensitizing you further from the sacredness of sex and from the sacredness of just a human body created in God's image, because you're like, I can look at every person now just as nothing more than an object to help me get to this place of pleasure. And so we've kind of been tracking along with where technology is going with that. And even this year at some of the big tech shows, there have been unveilings of, some of these robots. People are spending a lot of money and time to quickly develop these on a higher level and mass produce them. And I know that all sounds like sci-fi, but I'm telling you, like 10 years from now, um, that's what the conversations are going to be about. And if we're all taken surprised by it, then we're going to be completely overwhelmed. So now's the time to start having those conversations about not just porn, but to our kids. It's not just like, porn and, vibrators or, things like, it's like things that look and act human. Um, and how we're called to respond to that is a huge counterfeit to God's design.
I I'm doing the Bible through the year this year, and Leviticus was just like the past week, and these boundaries God has set up for sex. And I'm thinking, like, my mind jumped to those passages when you're talking about, like, no, those things are not listed specifically, but outside of God's plan was so clear, from animals to this to that to relational stuff. Like, my goodness, I could get stuck here for a while. So I'll jump forward, but thank you for the just bringing up another category to prayerfully not go and hide from, but be leading on the home
Well, no,
front.
it is a modern form of bestiality. Like, because I see that sin as God saying having sexual contact with any non-human
That's it.
body
Yep.
is just, it's a complete misuse of sex. Whether it's, back then, you were, out in it's an animal, or now when it's technology designed to look like a body, and it's all of that is a misuse that's going to cause, pain and regret and baggage, and it's going to desensitize us. And so, yeah, and just beware, dads, that that's out there and that it's coming, and that our kids are going to be growing up where that's going to be a real issue and a real temptation, that we need to give them some tools to navigate. Because it's like, well, my parents told me not to have sex with anybody, but what could it hurt to learn with this little tool over here? And we need to equip them for that.
Yeah. Let's swing to the other side of this conversation, which is flourishing and God's plan. And
Yeah, there we go.
so your gift that you and your wife have on your website of the free ebook, 9 Days to Great Sex. So I have not actually, I discovered this just a few days ago in preparing. My wife and I have not gone through, I think you recommend a chapter a day to kind of unpack and to have a lot of fun during this experience. But it's going after some of the baggage, right? There's so many layers to a conversation about having great sex in a marriage. And could you just give the flyover? We're going to link it for sure for all of our dads to go download and dive in. And then, of course, all your books. There's almost too many for me to bring up in this conversation, but we'll make sure to recommend and link them. Why did you release this free ebook?
Well, I didn't. We didn't want there to be any excuse or barrier keeping people from this message. We really felt like this is a message that we want to get out there, that sex is a gift. God wants you to thrive in it in marriage, but we have to do it God's way to really thrive, and how to work through past baggage, how to work through our own insecurities, the counterfeit messages we've been bombarded with, and to thrive in marriage, to be naked and unashamed the way God intended us to be in marriage, and to flourish, like you said. It's very, very first thing that God said to the very first couple: be fruitful and multiply. And the very first word he said, the be fruitful, is the Hebrew word para, which really means to flourish. So essentially the very first thing he said to the very first couple and to us is flourish, thrive, like, and he wants that for you in your marriage, and not just to survive, but to really thrive. So free ebook could help. It's daveandashley.com. And I'm sure Jeff will have that link in the show notes, and click on that, get the free ebook. But I hope that it is an encouragement to you and really helps you and your spouse talk about sex with each other, because, we've talked a lot about talking about sex with our kids, which is one conversation. A whole different conversation is in marriage, having the courage and the vulnerability to really talk about your sex life, your desires, your insecurities, all of it. And it takes vulnerability and courage, but it'll help you get to a new level in your intimacy, both inside and outside the bedroom.
Dave, I was going to kind of thread back to the power of words, and this, like, it does feel like you're giving the gift of this ebook to guide, men, the dads listening right now. Often it's the words, it's the talking about, it's the expressing that I struggle with. So I'll be the first to say thank you, and I want to add more intentionality on that front of words, conversation, talk about versus just being rhythms or patterns of feeling stuck in this area.
Yeah.
It's just that will actually, I think there's probably some link to flourishing that gives us more courage to talk to our kids and have those conversations with our kids. So it's probably all overlapping. But do you have any last words, any last thing you want to share with our Dad Awesome community?
Well, I want to applaud you dads for, hey, you've listened to the end, way to go, way to finish strong. And thank you for taking time to invest in being a better dad, which is what you're doing by listening to this podcast. I just think it is the best thing that we as men can focus on improving. We spend so much time trying to improve our health or our golf game or whatever it is. And those things are all fine and good, but really the things that are going to impact eternity and legacy, I can't think of anything more valuable than just improving as dads. And it's something I want to keep getting better at every day. And I appreciate you, Jeff, and what you're doing to lead this community. So just want to affirm you dads, because I know we can be so hard on ourselves sometimes and hear those negative soundtracks in our mind of places we feel like we're not measuring up. But just know, like, you are just the fact that you're listening to this now tells me a lot about your character and your desire. And so I just want to affirm you and cheer you on in that.
That's good. Thank you. Could you say a short prayer over all of us dads?
Absolutely. Father, I lift up every dad that's listening. I pray for Jeff that you would continue to bless him and his precious 4 daughters and his wife in this ministry, and continue to, Lord, just expand the reach of the important message that he's sharing here. And I pray for every dad that's listening all over the world right now, whenever and wherever they're listening. I just believe they're not listening by accident, that you've brought them to this moment to encourage them, to equip them, to remind them that you're with them and for them in their fatherhood journey. And just help all of us as men, God, to pass along generational blessing instead of baggage to our kids. Help us, Lord, to speak words of life. Help us, Lord, to receive the words of life you have spoken over us in your word, and to love our kids out of the overflow of love in our heart for you. We love you, Lord. We thank you for the gift of fatherhood, and we thank you for being the only perfect father and for loving us so well. In Jesus' name, amen.